The news is happening quickly for Ohio State, too fast, in fact, for us to keep up with it all as we record and travel back from Texas. So this Friday episode of The Beat will have some things that are already outdated. Lincoln Keynotes is in the portal. Cortez Hankton has been hired by Ohio State or is going to be hired to coach wide receivers, and there's a flurry of activity going on in the portal. So Jeremy Birmingham and me, Austin Ward, we did talk before we left on Thursday. And we wanted to make sure that you got this update ahead of time. So there's a lot of information in here that will stand up and some of it will not. But that is the warning for The Beat presented by the Waterworks ahead of time. So go into that and understand the situation we have here. And everything is moving forward is going to be fluid for the Buckeyes. And we'll keep following along with that as much as we can. We'll have an update later on Friday as we dive in a little bit more to what some of these coaching staff moves will mean. But now back to Austin and Berm. Yesterday in Texas. New year, new Ohio State. The Buckeyes have no choice now but to start looking ahead to 2026 and a lot of portal activity, coaching staff adjustments, and so much more to get ready to reload. Welcome to The Beat. It is a Friday presented by the Waterworks. He is Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. Wrapping things up down here. Happy New Year. Not the way anybody at Ohio State wanted to ring it in and start looking ahead to 2026. They thought they'd be playing a couple more games, but there's no choice now but to close the book on that and start looking at the biggest priorities of this offseason.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them to figure out. Ohio State, obviously, like everyone else, is now getting ready for the transfer portal window. What is it, a 10-day window, 15-day window? 15-day window, January 2nd through the 17th, and Ohio State is going to be impacted by that just as much as anybody else around the country. We'll see what the remaining playoff teams have to deal with. But, Ohio State is still top to bottom, one of the 2 or 3 best rosters in the entire sport, and the focus for the offseason doesn't change that much, which is retain the guys that are considering departures elsewhere, looking for greener opportunities. And there's not a lot of opportunities greener than Ohio State. So that makes it easier because you're starting from a point of, well, we have all this stuff and they don't. But money, opportunity, et cetera. And I mean, the key for Ohio State in these next couple of days is not just how do you immediately go out and fill some holes in the transfer portal, but what we talked about on Snap Judgments after the game on Wednesday night, which is how do you know everyone who's leaving? And there are some major decisions that have to be made, especially on the defensive side of the ball, especially on the defensive line with Caden McDonald, Kenyatta Jackson, among others. But that there's also, anyone can leave. So that is the new biggest albatross of college football. Like, there's no guarantee that any of these guys are back on your team. Even the guy, Ryan Day could lose Julian Sand tomorrow. You never know. Anything can happen in college football now. Yeah. And when your season ends in a way that feels so disappointing and feels so like crossroady, which again, I don't think it should. I want to be clear about that.
I thought about that. I was working on a story and thinking about the coordinator hire.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is like after 2016 for Urban Meyer and losing to Clemson, or 2 years ago at the Cotton Bowl for Ryan Day and giving up play calling. Like, this is a crossroads moment. And I'm like, that's not true, because 12 months ago he won a national championship. The program is not at a crossroads. It is at a stoplight and needs to or a fork in the road, but it's not like there's a cliff down one turn and paradise on the other. Like, there's options here where this thing is certainly not broken by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and that's, again, said it on Snap Judgments on Wednesday night. Like, it is really difficult. I saw actually Dan Wolken, which is not somebody I would ever really cite as a sense of.
I think this is a first.
As a logical, emotional, arbiter of anything, but it is really hard to live in a world where everything is a referendum. And I know that people are emotional and get to the point where every Ohio State loss feels like the end of the program. But if you look at what Penn State went through for the last few months, if you look at what Michigan's now had to deal with, that's not where you want to be. So the idea that you just scrap everything because Ohio State didn't win a national championship, that's not realistic. It's not fair to anybody. And it's certainly not how you have maintained a program for 100 plus years. That's the envy of college football. So, I wrote about it on Letterman Row on Thursday morning, but Ohio State went as the premier program in college football for the last 100 years, went 35 years between 1968 and 2002 without a national championship. And Buckeyes fans have been blessed in the last 23 years to see 3 of them. And also, not just 3 of them, but seasons like 2015, 2019, 2022, 2025 now, where you should have won a national championship, where you were the best team in the country and you didn't win. And that's not even including 96, 98, to other years like that. Like, the way you get there, the way you maintain that place is not by scrambling the jets every single time you lose. But in this instance, I do think that it's worth a lot of introspection for Ryan Day, a lot of self-reflection for Ryan Day to say, hey, am I listening to myself? Am I taking the advice I give to other people? Because one thing he said all year long, talking about Julian Sain, he doesn't make the same mistake twice. He doesn't. The Ryan Day losses do feel like the same mistakes over and over. And so it does bear some questioning. But again, I don't think that's an indication that anything is like fundamentally flawed in the program. It's just sometimes you lose. So now how do you fix it? And you have to fix it first by talent acquisition, which Ryan Day said on Tuesday's coaches press conference. Like that is the name of the game. And it's not just acquisition, it's retention. So the Buckeyes will already begin hosting visitors from the transfer portal. I've heard rumblings that John Walker, who's a Central Florida defensive tackle, is supposed to visit on Monday. You're going to see names popping up here over these next couple days. We don't talk about all that stuff, the machinations, the ins and outs daily on this show. If it's a good time to probably subscribe to Letterman Row, where we work with Spencer Holbrook and Mick Walker. But like, there is a lot happening, and most of it is just trying to lower the temperature between now and Sunday.
Yeah, which good luck on that front. Time will heal some of those wounds, but it might need more than getting to Monday. You know, you mentioned that there will be departures. That happened, within 20 minutes of the game ending with Jelani Thurman, his plans being released and announced publicly on social media that he would be going in the transfer portal. That's going to happen. I don't think that was a surprise to anybody, and it wasn't a reaction to him not really playing a role in the Cotton Bowl. A lot of those conversations had to be had, during that 2-week stretch. They were having meetings, and it was the rest recovery period of December. It was also charting the future, because Ohio State had to make the most of that time, and it was, all right, here's what your role is going to be. Here's your conversation with your position coach. This goes beyond the transfer portal. It also applies to the NFL draft, but all those things are not all of them will be finalized, but I think by and large, the way that Lincoln Kienholz talked on Monday at Cotton Bowl Media Day, you know what's likely to happen there. So there's going to be a flurry of activity, and I know that it'll seem like salt in the wounds on Friday or on Saturday over the weekend when you see some of the names that are potentially going to be involved. But the bottom third of this roster is going to be a constant churn every single year. The priority is making sure that you don't have that extend to touch your starting lineup, because there's not going to be a lot of that defensively. We think that Jermaine Matthews is going to return. They're going to make every available offer to Kenyatta Jackson and Caden McDonald, as you mentioned, to try and get them back. Offensively, you could pretty much retain that entire roster. So that's where the priority will be. And if that causes them to lose some of the depth pieces, this is also why you start to see people coming in already on visits, because those will be trading places. Who wants those spots the most is going to be pretty fascinating, because there is still the opportunity that already you can see that this being a college football playoff and a national title contender in 2026.
Yeah, because what you're really trying to avoid right now over these next few days for Ohio State is that hyper reaction where you lose unexpected guys. Jelani Thurman had given himself to the program for 3 years, worked hard, didn't make an impact, wasn't able to really get on the field here at Ohio State, couldn't do some of the little things that Will Kazmarek and other guys did that were ahead of him on the depth chart. That is going to happen. There's a lot of guys that you can go down the roster and be like, well, that's a guy who you could probably see depart. That's a guy who probably won't be here. Lincoln Kienholz, as you mentioned, again, we don't normally name names, but Lincoln's conversation is public. It's out there. There's going to be a lot of those guys. Like, there's a reason Ohio State signed 28 players in the high school signing class 3.5 weeks ago, because they're preparing for that, because they know the bottom third of the roster is going to turn over every single year. So how do you make sure that other players, and I'm going to throw names out there that people, because I know the social media world is already flaming with, oh, well, Jeremiah Smith's going to leave, or this guy's like, maybe. I mean, no one thought that Carnell Tate would have been having a conversation with Oregon last year, a day after the national championship. But like, so if you take that and realize that's possible, then sure, anyone could leave. Like, that is the reality. So it's making sure as soon as Ohio State gets back to Columbus, which, as we record this, I'm sure they've returned, and most people are probably heading back into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center already on Thursday morning to try to begin the autopsy here. But it's getting the new leaders, the guys who have to move down a row in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, because that starts now.
Yep.
Making sure that those guys are where they want to be. And that means players who have been important all year, but also maybe not given the relevance that they deserve. Jalen McClain's player, like Jalen's brother just signed at Tennessee, right? Like there's just so many moving parts in college football now. So like, you have to find a way to make sure that core group doesn't go anywhere. It's like the NFL now. Like, this is it. You have to retain your core starters. You have to retain your stars, and then build out around them. So roster building is more difficult than it's ever been, and Ohio State is not going to be immune to surprises either. But they know who they have to keep, and I find silver linings in things like a disappointing loss to Miami, because it does inflame the boosters. It does inflame the donors who are saying, hey, that's not the way our offensive line can look in a game like this ever again. So then you hope that it turns into, well, you know what? I've got a couple extra bucks to donate to make sure that guys who are needing to be back, Carson Hinsman, are.
Yeah.
We're not going to, there's a lot of things that are moving. Like, again, it is Friday morning as this hits your internet waves. The transfer portal literally just opened. Ohio State, as the time we record this, has had 2 players announce their intention to leave. That's Bryson Rogers and Jelani Thurman. That in itself is sort of like a testament to the culture of the program. But now, after back-to-back losses,
especially because those conversations have been ongoing,
and those conversations happened 3 weeks ago. Most of these kids who will end up entering the transfer portal already made up their minds. So the ones that haven't gone straight to social media and announced they were leaving as soon as the game ended, kudos. Like, you shouldn't do that to your teammates. I'll just say it. Like, I think that's Bush League by Jelani Thurman's agency. I think it's a terrible look. I think it's
completely irrelevant. What advantage does it give you to make that announcement on New Year's Eve after a loss?
Yeah,
it's nothing but, forget what impact it has on Ohio State. The agents don't care about that. I think it reflects poorly on the person that they're supposed to represent, because then the notion is that Jelani Thurman went to the locker room and texted his agent and said, I'm out of here. Like that, even if that's not reality, it's like so ridiculous and irresponsible.
Well, this is why you have a bunch of agents who are not really agents and people who are just trying to capitalize on the moment. And like, it's midnight on New Year's Eve, like no one cares. So it's frustrating, but that's what you have to deal with. I think that Ohio State is just in a spot where they know they pretty much know who's going to leave. And they already have a very lengthy list of guys that they think that can fit this program coming in. Obviously, discussion around Chaz Coleman, the Penn State defensive end edge rusher, who's from Ohio, who is in the portal. That's a guy a lot of people think will end up at Ohio State. There's safeties out there. The Buckeyes need to replace Caleb Downs. They're going to be looking all over the country at running back probably. It's likely we'll see 1 or 2 departures, and then you will see 1 or 2 additions, even though the Buckeyes signed Legend Bay and Favor Aki at tight end, knowing that you're going to lose Will Kazmarek and maybe Max Clare, losing now Jelani Thurman. You expect other tight ends on the roster who are lower, like you are going to leave. So I wouldn't be surprised if they have to go back to the well there. And then you look for potential stars, because they're going to be out there. This is the reality of the situation, that Ohio State is still the place that 99.5% of kids in the country would love to play given the opportunity. And so the Buckeyes get to be the bully in these next few weeks. And going into that...
Well, they can be.
They can be. And they should be. But as going into that time frame after a loss is a good spur underneath the butt to say, hey, we actually now see exactly some areas we have to address. And it's easier to point those out to your current roster when that game happened and it looked the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, the other spur right to the ribs, I think, will be with the coaching staff situation. And Ryan Day has to replace Brian Hartline. He already knew that. But that was sort of a back burner topic. And transfer portal and roster building activity, I think, will probably still be at the forefront of his mind, at least on January 2nd and through this window. But there can't really be any uncertainty that what happened on Wednesday night will need to influence his thinking, in my opinion. Maybe he disagrees with that. I'd be surprised if he did, because the way that he, phrased it was you had to look at everything, and that tells you that right there was an opportunity in an audition for the rest of that offensive staff, including him returning to the play calling role, and it didn't work, and it didn't look noticeably or consistently different than what happened against Indiana. So I think that probably, at least from my vantage point, tilts that scales towards an outside hire. Keenan Bailey can still be reshuffled a little bit and coach wide receivers. I think that's probably a very likely outcome. But I think everyone that maybe wanted a splashy offensive coordinator hire even a year ago instead of a promotion for Brian Hartline, which is not everyone, but certainly some folks, I think that's got to happen now. And whether that goes to a hire that was like Bill O'Brien initially 2 years ago, or some of the other names that we've already floated as potentially being on the wish list, I don't know. And I don't know what the timeline looks like for him right now, but I do feel like the way that it's got to play out has shifted.
I think the philosophy probably changes a little bit because, as we've been saying for weeks, like there was basically an open audition happening on the current staff. That audition fell on its face. And again, I don't think that the plan against Miami was necessarily bad. I just thought it was clear there was no backup plan. When you go into that game thinking, hey, we can win this game down the field, and Julian Saint threw it 35 times and ended up minus the interceptions. The last one, it is what it is. Didn't have bad numbers on the day. The Buckeyes moved the ball through the air when they could protect him, but it was clear that once they realized they couldn't protect him, and it didn't happen until the final drive of the first half, that they thought, hey, we can just actually run the ball or use the running backs in the passing game the way that Miami did early in the game. And when you have a slow developing plays and have to get the ball 25 yards down the field to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, then you are pretty reliant on your offensive line blocking for you. But that didn't happen until Josh Padilla came in the second half. So long story short, I don't think the timeline really shifts here for Ohio State. I think this was always the plan for Ryan Day. The NFL season ends this weekend, and there will be a lot of coaches available that for conversation that have otherwise not been. And then the NFL playoffs begin. And if Ryan Day wants to follow in some of the paths that he's already established, maybe you wait till that's done, because there's no hurry at this point. Now, you certainly want to get it right. That's the most important thing. But there's a lot of guys out there. And there's a lot of coaches around the country, much like players around the country, that will crawl over broken glass and through fire to play at Ohio State. Coaching at Ohio State is a big deal, and there's a lot of people who will be excited for the opportunity to interview with Ryan Day. And the relationship now with Matt Patricia, Matt Patricia's influence and tentacles in the NFL, Ryan Day's coaching tree has gained like a whole nother a whole nother branch because Matt Patricia can now go out and help. Yeah. As we saw with the addition of Josh Boyer, that Bobby Carpenter talked about on Tuesday at the live show of Roosters, because there's a lot of guys out there that are looking for an opportunity in a place like Ohio State that has resources and is willing to use them. So I don't know that the timeline changes necessarily, but I certainly think you will hear a lot more names now. Once this initial flurry of transfer portal activity happens, then you'll start to see the Buckeyes really reel it in as staff-wise, because there's also other discussions. There's Larry Johnson's future. Is he going to stick around? Is he still feeling motivated to keep going? And is his contract up, or did he have it? I thought he
got an additional year last year.
Additional year, that's what I thought. So he's got one left, but now he has to figure out again, is that what he wants to do? This is college football. It doesn't stop. And, we get to the offseason, and there's a lot more stuff to do in the offseason than there is during the season sometimes.
Yeah, it gives us plenty to talk about right here on The Beat, which is presented by the Waterworks. I failed to mention, and I must do it now before it's too late.
Well, it's 2026. It's winter.
I know.
It's cold.
Seasons change. Comfort doesn't. Call the Waterworks and Hetter Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing for maintenance, installation, and repairs, or visit online at thewaterworks.com. The Waterworks and Hetter Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, a proud sponsor of Ohio State athletics. I should have brought that to your attention much earlier than now, but the Waterworks, other folks, sign those NIL deals with the Buckeyes. Get that transfer portal action going.
Time and change, right? And we're in it now. We're in it for Ohio State, and now you have to know, if you're an Ohio State fan watching this, like, the Buckeyes have done this before. They are pretty good at adjusting. They are pretty good at making sure that they don't slip into mediocrity. And as crazy as it has to be said, 12-2 college football playoff season after a national championship is not mediocrity.
Beating Michigan.
It's not a mediocre season. It's still a successful season just because everyone's season ends with a loss, except for one team every year. And so you have to reframe what constitutes success in this new era of college football. The Buckeyes are certainly unhappy that they fell short of 2 of their 3 goals, but that's life. Pick up and move on.
Yeah, it is. So on to 2026 and on to the off-season work. There will be plenty for us to break down right here on 97.1 Fan, 10 TV, and 10 TV Plus, and anywhere you get the podcast, so the audio-only feed. We're not slowing down at all. We're going to keep building, and Ohio State will be rebuilding and retooling right here on the fly, and we'll cover all of that as it happens. Thanks for joining us again on The Beat, presented by the Waterworks. He's Berm. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you back in the great state of Ohio.